I'm adding water to all the hair on her head right now because the water is going to give me a better sense of control. Nadia has thousands upon thousands of hairs on her head. So to organize, I'm going to add water. The water also creates weight on the hair. It lets it actually hang without flicking up and becoming frizzy and fly away. The first thing that we're going to start with is the fringe. And 9 times out of 10, I am trying to get the fringe dialed in from the very beginning of the appointment because I actually want her to feel comfortable, to settle in, to get an idea of the direction that we're going, to feel heard, to feel like, oh my gosh, he actually did what we talked about. Because that's a very valid concern for many people who are distrusting of salon professionals. It's like, oh, they just did whatever they felt like they wanted to do. My sectioning is sectioned back to her apex. Now the apex is going to be the highest point vertically and the highest point horizontally on the head shape. This gives me the opportunity to create more fullness, more coverage in regards to her fringe without it feeling like a comb over. If I start pulling from the crown and bring all this forward, it's not to say that you can't do that, it's just you start to enter shag and mullet territory very quickly. So it's good to have a bit of reservation on what your section looks like. And beyond the apex, we're coming down to her recession point, where her hairline starts to become vertical. Do you see how this is angled? And that's actually relatively directly in line with the arch of the brow. That's going to be a little different on each person, but we all share similarities. And I'm going to start from the center, and I'm going to take a section, and we're actually going to establish the layers first. Okay, so I'm gathering this hair, and I'm lifting it straight out from the head. And I'll actually turn her so you can better see. And we're layering. Now that I cut that, I kind of want to see what that length looks like as I start to move it around. And also where the peak of weight sits. So you see where this sits in relation to the length that we put down at the bottom. We know that we want her fringe to be on the longer side, but it's got to be functional. We know it's going to shrink. I'm using tension on her hair right now. So now I'm going back through and I'm identifying the hair that lives closer to the base. You see how that affected where the longest length at the bottom actually sat. Now I'm already anticipating that once this dries, we're going to end up in that territory. So this is playing it safe. And we can always return and take more off of the bottom. If this was a salon setting, I would have the mirror positioned right where you guys are at. Because as I'm working with her hair, I can see the surface length, I can see my cutting angle, but I can't actually see where the hair is being sent to. But if I use my mirror, I can clearly see where that hair is being brought to. That way it keeps me on track. So I brought section number 2 into section number 1, and I have options from there. I could bring everything into number 1. What that's going to do is it's going to leave the most amount of length within this corner, that recession area. So if someone is really weak through there, might be a safe play to bring everything into number 1. Because then if you drop it down and you decide, oh, that feels a bit too long or a bit too heavy, you could always go back through and bring it as a traveling guide instead of a stationary guide. The stationary guide is going to be the most amount of length that you're going to get. We are going to opt for a traveling guide. And I don't think that I mentioned this already, but to keep me on track, I'm always going to comb the section that I'm about to cut. So as I was working this third section, I wasn't continually raking my comb back through this way. I was moving the hair that I'm about to cut into position, because what you will find is when you start doing all of this extra combing, you're shifting the base of the guide and you're going to make it shorter than what it should be. And hopefully you guys can see the sort of dynamic of the fringe. It's getting longer as we make our way to the recession point.